I was a Muslim who came to the West in 1992 and assimilated. My response to 9/11 and the threat of Islamism was very different from the responses of many Western leaders over the years. I lost my Muslim faith and recognized the challenge Islamism posed to Western institutions and values. While Western political leaders, mired in the ideology of multi-culturalism, failed to address the threat adequately. More than 2 decades after 9/11, we see massive demonstrations on the streets of Europe and the United States in favor of the anti-Semitic, genocidal, Islamist butchers of Hamas. We see 3 presidents of the most renowned universities in the United States, Harvard, Penn, and MIT, testify before Congress and refuse to say that calling for the destruction of Israel and genocide against the Jews violates campus rules, hiding behind the studied talking point that it depends on the context. We see in the United States anti-Semitic incidents go up by 400%. This number is from a report published on October 25, so I assume that it's actually much more. How on earth did this happen? What's the solution to this moral and intellectual rot? Many of you might be familiar with my story, so I'll keep it as brief and to the point as possible. But I think it offers some perspective on our current predicament. I was born in Somalia. I spent my formative years there and in Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. I was part of a clan culture where the bloodline mattered above everything else. My clan uncles were there to help us out with schooling, food, and money wherever we went. There was no escape from the clan, which was also in many ways a microcosm of Islam, the dominant religion of Somalia. Many of the clan rules, especially for women, were the same, and sometimes they were drawn from the strictures of Islam. The clan network helped my family to survive. My father, an anti-government dissident, relied on them for support, and the clan was at times generous and hospitable, and at times vicious and brutal, especially where the unwritten code of honor was violated. This was the case for girls. I was raised as a Muslim girl. I attended Quran school, and according to the values of my clan and my religion, I carried out the back-breaking domestic labor. Girls and women are there for marriage, for breeding, and for household chores and nothing else. Girls were seen as problems. My grandmother had a single son and 10 daughters. Do you know how she described them? She used to say quite openly, "I have 1 son and 10 problems." Girls were a burden, and the misogynistic culture of the clan and Islam was enforced by women as much as it was enforced by men. I, like the majority of other Somali girls, underwent female genital mutilation, or purification as it was described. That should tell you all you need to know about the status of women in my native society. Clan life based on Islam was a life of violence. I was beaten constantly as a child, and for many years, I thought that this was normal. Death was also normal. People died all the time of violence and of disease. From Allah we come and to Allah we return was a phrase I heard constantly. To this day, when filling out medical forms that ask about my family history of cancer and such things, I find myself unable to answer. Death was such a common occurrence in my early years that we barely bothered to inquire into its causes. When I was a teenager, living with my family in Kenya, along came the Muslim Brotherhood, incidentally, the Islamist group that spawned Hamas. The Brotherhood offered something more. It offered a life of service to Allah. I felt a glorious purpose. We had a mission to convert people to the true Islam. There was intellectual nourishment, or at least that's what I thought, because we were required to study the Quran and the Hadith. We were a community, a true brotherhood, united with a divine purpose. And Islamism went further than the passivity in the face of death that I had grown up with. It embraced death. To die for Allah was the most wonderful thing I could imagine at that age. I would be guaranteed a place in paradise. It was through clan life, the Muslim Brotherhood, and my Islamic schooling that I became an anti-Semite. The worst insult in the Somali community was to be called a Jew. Not that any of us actually knew one. To be called a Jew was so abhorrent, some felt justified in killing anyone who so dishonored them with this slur. I vividly remember sitting with my female fellows in mosques, cursing Israel and praying Allah to destroy them. We were certainly not interested in a peaceful two-state solution. We were taught to want to see Israel wiped off the map. The elimination of Israel was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when. For us as Muslims, Israel did not represent a territorial dispute. To want Israel's destruction was an act of worship. To entertain notions of a two-state solution was an act of sin, a transgression, a betrayal of God, His Prophet, and the Ummah. When I was 16, my teacher of religion was Sister Aziza. She read to us the Quran's lurid descriptions of the everlasting fire that burns flesh and dissolves skin, the place reserved for Jews, their eternal home where they belong. Our religious teachers described Jews as physically monstrous, with horns coming from their heads, out of which flew devils that would corrupt the world. Jews controlled everything. They told us, and it was the duty of Muslims to destroy them. We made no distinction between liberal and Orthodox Jews, or between Jews who settled Palestine and those who opposed the settlements, between religious or atheist Jews. We also made no distinction between adult Jews and children, male, female, mothers, old and young. To us, Jews were Jews, all of them evil and all of them enemies of Islam and all that's good, true, and decent. Our mission was to single-mindedly destroy them through prayer, through propaganda, and for those lucky enough to have the means to kill them. It was a lot to take in for a teenager who read Western romance novels in secret. But to my shame, I believed those things. Much later, I fled to the Netherlands to escape a marriage arranged by my father to a man in Canada. Looking back, I recalled the violence, hatred, and discord of the societies I had grown up in. I was shocked by my new home in Holland. It was radically different from anything I had known. Here in Holland, there was a separation between religion and politics. Women had equal rights and could live independently and make their own choices. There was a concept of the common good that I had never known before. There was no talk of death, no enemies to fight or pray against, and no bloodline or religion that could only be defended by waging war. The more I understood about this new society, the more I liked it and admired it. I assimilated. I lived life as a Dutch woman, suppressing the dissonance I felt at betraying my religion and upbringing. I abandoned the ideas of Islamism, and I educated myself on anti-Semitism.